Okay, picture this. You're just completely in the thick of it. You know, the nonstop demands of work, you've got school runs, homework battles, just that endless cycle,
Yeah.
right? Feeding the kids, clothing the kids, it's a lot.
It really is.
Now imagine layering on to all of that, the responsibility for an aging parent. Maybe it's just coordinating doctor's appointments from miles away, or maybe you're managing their bills because, they're starting to struggle a bit.
Or maybe they've actually moved in with you.
Exactly. And suddenly you're navigating personal care needs, mobility issues, maybe even memory loss. That's not just a busy life. For millions of people here in the U.S., that's the reality. That's living in what they call the sandwich generation.
That phrase really captures it, doesn't it? Being squeezed between two generations.
It absolutely does. And today we're taking a deep dive into this incredibly common, yet, often kind of invisible experience. We've got a stack of sources here actually sent in by a listener who wants to understand this better. We're looking at some pretty solid research reports, insightful financial articles, and crucially, some legal perspectives too.
Sounds like a good mix. So what's the plan?
Our mission today is pretty straightforward. We want to unpack exactly what it means to be caught or squeezed between caring for your own children and supporting aging parents. We'll look at the scale of this in the U.S., dig into the really significant financial, emotional, and physical pressures that come with it.
And then hopefully find some ways to navigate it, based on the sources, of course.
Exactly. Explore the potential strategies, the supports that might be out there, all based on what these materials tell us, because that image of being squeezed, it really hits home. And these sources, well, they paint a vivid picture of just how intense that pressure can be.
The data, the hours involved, the impact on well-being. It's all in there.
Yeah, we're going to look at the sheer numbers, those hours they dedicate every single week, and the very real, measurable impact this has, not just on today, but, on their financial stability for the future too.
Right, long-term effects. Okay, so where do we start? What exactly is the sandwich generation? How do the sources define it?
Well, one of the key reports we're using, it's called Burning the Candle at Both Ends, gives a pretty clear, focused definition.
Okay.
It defines sandwich caregivers as people providing unpaid care to an adult and who also have responsibility for children living in their home. So it's specifically that dual role.
Got it. Caring for an older adult, usually a parent, right? Well, you still have kids under your roof?
That's the core of it. Responsibility for an older adult plus kids at home.
And you said millions. This isn't some small niche group then?
Not at all. The report estimates around 11 million such caregivers across the U.S.
11 million, well.
Yeah, and to put that in perspective, that's about 28%, nearly 1 in 3 of all adult caregivers in the country. Think about that. Almost a third of people providing unpaid care to an adult are also juggling childcare.
That's a huge number. 11 million people living that reality day in, day out.
It really is. And, it's worth mentioning, while that report uses the specific definition, care for an adult and kids at home, other definitions are out there that might actually capture an even broader group.
Oh, like what?
Well, a Pew study that's referenced in one of the articles, for instance, it includes people who might be giving financial support to an adult child, maybe one who's struggling, or caring for a parent over 65, even if they don't live together. So the scope can shift a bit.
Right. But the core idea is that multi-generational support load.
Exactly. And I've also heard the term club sandwich generation. What's that about?
Yeah, that's popped up. It describes an even more complex, maybe even more pressured situation. It's where someone is caring not just for their kids and their parents, but maybe also for a grandparent. Yeah, one of the sources, the legal one from Texas Trust Law, mentions this, points out the sort of extreme pressure when you're basically responsible for 4 generations all at once.
4 generations. I can't even imagine. That sounds like an impossible juggling act. So, given these different definitions, is it possible that even that 11 million figure, could it be an undercount?
That's a really crucial point. And yeah, it's specifically raised in the commentary for the Burning the Candle report. Dr. Phelan Lewis, the expert quoted there, she highlights several pretty compelling reasons why the true number might be, well, significantly higher.
Okay, like what? Why would it be higher?
Well, first, there's just the whole issue of self-identification. A lot of people who are, checking in on their mom regularly, helping with groceries, providing that emotional support, they don't call themselves caregivers.
Right. They just think, I'm being a good son or I'm helping my parents.
Exactly. It's seen as family duty, just helping out someone you love. They don't use that formal label. So if a survey asks, are you a caregiver? They might just say no.
It's not a defined role in their mind.
Precisely. And that informal nature of care is just really hard for surveys to capture accurately. Second, that specific study focused on people helping with ADL's activities of daily living, like bathing, or IADL's instrumental activities, like managing money or direct medical tasks.
Okay, so the hands-on stuff.
Right, which is important, obviously, but it might totally miss a huge amount of care that's more about emotional support, companionship, just monitoring things from a distance, or simply spending significant time to prevent isolation.
So those regular check-in calls, the weekly visits just to chat, being the person they call in a crisis, that might not even get counted in that 11 million.
It might not. And that kind of support, as you know, it's incredibly valuable. It takes a lot of time and emotional energy, but it doesn't fit neatly into boxes like help with bathing or manage medications.
Yeah.
So the expert commentary really suggests that people are very likely providing more care, both in terms of the sheer number of hours and the complexity, than what gets formally reported in a lot of studies. The real impact is probably even bigger than the numbers suggest.
Okay, so millions, potentially even more, juggling care across generations. Who are these people? What do we know about the demographics of this sandwich generation?
The research paints a pretty distinct picture, and one of the most striking things is their age. Sandwich caregivers are, on average, significantly younger than other adult caregivers.
Younger? How much younger?
The average age for a sandwich caregiver is just 41. Compare that to an average of 53 for caregivers who don't have children living at home.
41. Wow, so that puts them squarely in Gen X and millennials mostly?
Primarily, yes. Gen X makes up the biggest chunk, about 49%, and millennials account for 31%. And that's a really stark contrast to the non-sandwich caregivers, who are mostly baby boomers.
Okay, so they're younger. What does that mean, though, practically speaking, for the pressures they face?
Well, think about it. Being in your early 40s often means you're right in your peak working years. You're likely still building your career, maybe paying off student loans, dealing with mortgage payments, and definitely facing the high costs of raising kids.
Right, all that's happening anyway.
Exactly. And then you layer on top of that the significant financial and time burdens of caring for an older adult. It's that unique sort of double squeeze on their resources happening during a life stage that's already financially demanding and really critical for building long-term security.
That younger age definitely adds a whole other layer of pressure. Is this group diverse in other ways? Ethnically?
Yes, the sources show they are more ethnically diverse compared to non-sandwich caregivers. Hispanic caregivers make up about 22% of this group in the report, and African-American caregivers represent 16%.
Okay.
And both of those proportions are higher than what you see among caregivers who don't have kids at home.
And what about their household setup? Are they mostly married, single, income levels?
The majority, about 79%, are married or living with a partner. Their median household income is around $51,900, which is actually slightly lower than non-sandwich caregivers, who average about $56,300.
Huh. Lower. Even though they're younger, maybe more likely to be dual income.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, but it suggests that even with potentially two incomes, the sheer outgoings covering costs for raising kids and supporting parents might make their overall budgets tighter compared to older caregivers who might be retired, have fewer dependents, or have paid off big debts like mortgages.
Right, the demands on that income are just much higher across multiple generations. Okay, let's shift to who they're caring for on the adult side. Is it always a parent?
Most often, yes. Over half, 53%, are caring for a parent or a parent-in-law. But it definitely varies.
Okay.
About 1 in 10, 11% are caring for a grandparent or grandparent-in-law, which connects back to that club sandwich idea you mentioned.
Right.
And then 8% are caring for a spouse or partner, and the rest are caring for other relatives, friends, or neighbors. It's interesting, the report notes that millennials in this group are actually more likely to be caring for a grandparent compared to their Gen X counterparts.
Interesting. And what are the main health reasons driving the need for this care? What conditions are we talking about?
It's quite a diverse range, really reflects all the different needs older adults can have. The most common reason cited in the report is just general aging or frailty. That was about 12%.
Okay, that makes sense.
Other common ones include recovering from wounds or surgery, 10%. Mobility issues, 7%, mental illness or behavioral health issues, also 7%, and then chronic conditions like diabetes, 7%, or cancer, 6%. Back problems also get a mention.
You mentioned mental health, and
yeah,
I assume memory issues fall in there too. That seems like a particularly challenging aspect.
Yes, and this is a really significant finding, I think. It really underscores the complexity here. While only about 6% listed Alzheimer's or dementia as the primary reason for care, a full 20%, 1 in 5 of these sandwich caregivers report they are caring for someone who suffers from Alzheimer's or some other form of mental confusion. That could be the main issue, or it could be alongside other physical health problems.
Wow. So 1 in 5 is grappling with cognitive impairment, even if it's not the only thing they're dealing with. That must completely change the nature of the care needed.
It absolutely does. Caring for someone with dementia or significant confusion, it just adds layers of complexity, unpredictability, and immense emotional strain. You need different skills. You face unique challenges around safety, communication, managing difficult behaviors. It's tough.
Yeah.
The sources really make it clear the conditions range from, acute temporary physical needs, maybe after a fall or surgery, to very long-term progressive physical problems, and then these often incredibly challenging memory, emotional, and mental health issues.
Okay, let's dig into the actual tasks.
Huh.
What are these 11 million plus people doing? It sounds like the list of responsibilities must be huge.
It's truly comprehensive. The report breaks it down into categories, and it really shows how much they're balancing. First up are the instrumental activities of daily living, or IADLs.
IADLs. Right. Can you quickly remind us what those are?
Sure. IADLs are basically the tasks needed for independent living, managing a household, but not necessarily the hands-on personal care. So think managing finances, providing transportation, grocery shopping, preparing meals, general housework, home maintenance, managing medications.
Got it. Sort of the keeping life running tasks.
Exactly. The skills you need to function independently in the world beyond just basic self-care.
And sandwich caregivers are heavily involved in these.
Extremely. The report shows really high rates, like 80% help with transportation, 76% with housework, 62% with preparing meals. And if you're the primary caregiver, those numbers are even higher. These are essential functions that just demand a ton of time and logistical juggling.
Okay, so IADLs are almost a given. What about the more personal care tasks? The ADLs, activities of daily living.
Right. ADLs are those fundamental self-care tasks. Bathing, dressing, eating, getting in and out of a bed or chair, using the toilet, managing incontinence. Generally more physically demanding, more intimate care.
And how many are doing those?
3 out of 5 sandwich caregivers help with at least one ADL. On average, they're assisting with about 1.7 different ADL tasks each week. The most common one is helping someone get in or out of beds or chairs. 45% do that.
And how do they feel about doing these tasks? Are they finding them physically difficult?
Interestingly, this group, the sandwich caregivers, they actually tend to report less difficulty with ADLs compared to the older non-sandwich caregivers. About 18% report difficulty versus 25% of the older group.
Why is that?
Well, the report suggests it might simply be down to their younger age. Being younger, they might be relatively more physically able, making those tasks slightly less challenging for them personally. But, that doesn't take away from the time commitment or the emotional side of it.
Makes sense. Okay, what about the more complex, maybe medically related tasks?
Yes. This is one of the most, I think, striking findings in the report. It really highlights a major challenge. Over 3 in 5, 63% of sandwich caregivers are performing medical or nursing tasks.
63%. And we're not just talking about handing over a pill here, are we?
No, not at all. This can include things like managing really complex medication schedules, maybe multiple meds at different times, preparing special food for specific medical diets like low sodium or for swallowing difficulties, changing wound dressings, monitoring vital signs like blood pressure or blood sugar, helping with medical equipment, oxygen tanks, walkers, feeding tubes sometimes.
Okay, those sound like tasks that...
Yeah.
Well, they sound like they need some level of training or medical know-how.
Precisely. And this is the really alarming part. 41%, nearly half of the sandwich caregivers doing these skilled medical tasks, report doing them with absolutely no prior preparation or training.
No training at all.
None. And 15% of those doing them find the tasks difficult. Just think about that. Almost half are essentially teaching themselves how to manage potentially critical medical care, often on the fly, with no formal guidance. It's concerning.
That is incredibly concerning. Yeah. Wow. It really shows how people get thrust into these complex roles without the support they need. Are there other kinds of support activities they're involved in?
Oh, yeah. Beyond the direct physical or household stuff, they're also heavily involved in managing the whole care situation. Like 68% are monitoring the care recipient's condition, watching for changes, signs of trouble. 62% are communicating with healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, therapists.
Which could be a job in itself.
Absolutely, especially if you're coordinating multiple specialists or maybe dealing with communication challenges due to cognitive issues like dementia. And then 50% are actively advocating for the person they care for, making sure their needs and wishes are heard and met by the healthcare system or social services.
That communication and advocacy piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a full-time job right there. Navigating the system, insurance, appointments.
It really is. It adds this whole other layer of cognitive load, emotional labor, on top of all the physical tasks. You're not just providing care, you're acting as a case manager, an interpreter, an advocate, often battling bureaucracy.
Okay, so with all these tasks, housework, personal care, medical stuff, advocacy, how much time are we talking about? How many hours a week are they sinking into this?
The average, according to the report, is 22 hours per week.
22 hours.
A week.
Yep.
22 hours.
That's basically a part-time job.
Exactly. On top of their actual job, remember, most of them are working full-time, and on top of their childcare responsibilities. Just try to imagine that juggle. A full-time job, this 22-hour-a-week caregiving job, plus actively raising kids. The time commitment is just huge. Leaves very little room for anything else.
And I bet that 22 hours is just the average. Must be higher for some people.
Oh, definitely. The average hours shoot way up for those caring for a spouse, a staggering 47 hours per week on average.
47 hours? That's like a second full-time job.
It essentially is. For those caring for a parent, the average is closer to 24 hours weekly. The report uses something called a burden of care index. It combines the tasks and the hours and finds that over a third, 36% of sandwich caregivers are in a high burden situation.
High burden. Okay.
Yeah.
And how long does this typically go on for? Is it short-term, long-term?
For this specific group, the sandwich caregivers, the average duration of care reported is 3.1 years.
3 years.
Which is actually shorter than the average. For non-sandwich caregivers, their average is 4.4 years. The report suggests this might be because the sandwich generation is younger, and maybe some of the care needs they're dealing with are more episodic, like recovery from surgery. But obviously, many are dealing with ongoing progressive conditions, too.
And where are the people they're caring for typically located? Are they nearby?
Yeah, the sources show a really strong pattern of proximity, which makes sense if you're providing this much hands-on care, right? A huge majority, 82%, live either with their care recipient or within just 20 minutes of them. And a big chunk, 35%, are actually living in the same household.
So a third of them are literally trying to balance caregiving for parents and kids under the same roof.
Exactly. Which brings its own unique set of challenges, privacy, space, feeling like you're always on call. Most care recipients are living either in their own home, about 51%, or they've moved in with the caregiver, that 35%. Only a small percentage, about 6%, are in formal care facilities like assisted living or nursing homes.
The report also mentioned something about rural caregivers. What's the situation there?
Yeah, it highlights an interesting dynamic. While most sandwich caregivers live in urban or suburban areas, a fair number of the people they care for live in rural areas, about 33%. That means about 1 in 5 urban or suburban caregivers are actually traveling to rural areas to provide care.
Okay, and what about those caregivers who live rurally themselves?
For the sandwich caregivers who live and provide care in a rural setting, that's about 13% of the total group. The report points to an increased burden. And it seems largely due to a lack of available support services out there.
Lack of services? What kind?
Well, fewer than half of them, only 48%, have other unpaid help from family or friends nearby. And very few use paid services like home health aides or adult daycare. Only 20% of recipients in rural areas use those. Things like transportation help or respite care, which gives the caregiver a break, are reportedly much less available.
So if those formal supports and even informal help from family aren't there, the sandwich caregiver is left holding the entire bag.
Pretty much. They often end up shouldering the whole burden themselves. There's a statistic in the report that 38% of these rural sandwich caregivers have actually made modifications to their homes to accommodate care needs. That suggests they're adapting their own environment to make complex care possible, because they can't easily rely on outside help or services.
Okay, we've got a really detailed picture now. Who they are, who they're caring for, the immense tasks and time involved. Let's really get into that squeeze now, the strain, the impact this has on their own lives, especially their work, their well-being.
Yeah, this is where you really see the human cost, beyond just the hours and tasks. The stress and strain are significant and they're widespread. According to that main report, a third, 33% of sandwich caregivers report experiencing high emotional stress because of their role.
A third. High stress.
Yeah. And 1 in 5 reports high financial strain, that's 20%. Another 1 in 5 reports high physical strain, 18%. And maybe most concerning, 20% 1 in 5 say that caregiving has actually made their own personal health worse.
Those are serious impacts on their own lives, their own health.
They really are. And there was another study mentioned from Forbes and AARP that echoes this really personal toll. They found 40% of sandwich caregivers seldom or never feel relaxed.
Never feel relaxed.
More than half, 56%, struggle just to maintain their own mental health. And 41% report feeling lonely. Just think about that combination. Constant stress, can't relax, struggling mentally, feeling isolated, all while juggling these huge responsibilities.
That mental health statistic, 56% struggling, that's really poignant. Are there differences in who feels the strain most acutely?
Yes, the sources do point to some differences. Women in this role tend to report higher levels of emotional stress compared to men. And interestingly, even though they're younger and maybe more physically capable, the younger sandwich caregivers, the millennials and Gen Xers, they report higher levels of emotional difficulty and anxiety than older caregivers.
Huh. Why might that be?
Well, the report speculates it could be a few things. Maybe they're newer to caregiving, less experienced. Maybe it's that intense pressure of juggling it with demanding careers and young kids simultaneously. Or perhaps they have less experience navigating those complex family dynamics that often come up around care issues.
Does where they live, like living with the parent, make a difference? Or the relationship itself?
Absolutely. The data clearly shows that caregivers who live in the same household as the person they care for, they face higher physical strain. 26% report high strain, higher financial strain, 27%, and they're more likely to say caregiving has worsened their own health, 30%.
Wow.
And they also report feeling significantly less choice about taking on the role. Only 40% felt they had a choice, compared to 62% of those not living together. When you live together, the demands are just. They're often constant, they can be unexpected, and there's very little personal space or time off.
And the relationship. Caring for a parent versus, say, a neighbor must feel different.
It does seem to. The report finds that sandwich caregivers looking after close relatives, like parents or spouses, report greater stress and strain overall compared to those caring for other relatives or non-relatives. For instance, 40% caring for close relatives report high emotional stress, 26% report high financial strain.
And spouses. You mentioned that was a smaller group.
Yeah, the report cautions the sample size is small, but for spousal caregivers in the sandwich situation, it notes particularly high rates of financial strain, 41%, and an impact on their own health, 40%. It highlights just how intense that burden becomes when the person needing care is your life partner.
Okay, so this immense strain, it clearly doesn't just stay at home. It must spill over into their work lives. You said most of them are employed.
Overwhelmingly so. Overall, 67% of sandwich caregivers are working. And among the millennials in this group, it's even higher, 76% are employed.
So, okay, picture this again. They're working, 35, 40 hours a week at their paid job?
Average is 36 hours a week for their paid job, yes.
Plus, they're putting in those average 22 hours a week on caregiving.
Right. That's a combined workload of nearly 60 hours right there. And that's before you even factor in the significant demands of actually raising their own children.
It's no surprise then that 60%, 6 out of 10 of working sandwich caregivers say that caregiving has had a significant impact on their work.
The impact is definitely widespread, and it hits their careers and finances directly. The report details exactly how it interferes. Almost half, 49%, say they've had to go in late, leave early, or take time off specifically because of caregiving.
Okay.
A pretty substantial number, 19%, have had to take a formal leave of absence that's actually a higher rate than for non-sandwich caregivers. 14% have had to cut their work hours, which directly cuts their income.
Right.
10% have actually received warnings about their performance or attendance, which puts their job security at risk. 4% have had to turn down promotions. Think about the long-term career impact there. Another 4% have given up work entirely.
Wow.
And then you have 2% retiring early because of it, and another 2% who've lost job benefits like health insurance or retirement contributions.
These sacrifices, turning down promotions, cutting hours, taking leave, quitting. The source said 53% have already made some kind of career sacrifice. What are the long-term financial consequences of doing that?
Oh, they're profound, and they ripple out for years, even decades. When you cut hours or take unpaid leave, you lose wages right now, obviously. But you also slow down, maybe even halt, your career progression. Turning down a promotion means missing out on higher earning potential over your entire remaining career.
Yeah.
Leaving the workforce or retiring early, that drastically reduces your lifetime earnings. It impacts your ability to save for your own retirement. It affects your Social Security benefits down the line. The report explicitly says 42% of sandwich caregivers have already had to postpone their own retirement plans.
So it's not just about making ends meet today. It's fundamentally changing their future financial security.
Absolutely. Often during the very years they should be maximizing their income and saving aggressively for their own later life.
And are there differences in the kind of workplace support they get? Like based on their age or generation?
Yes, this is another really critical point the report brings up. While millennials are the most likely to be employed among this group,
Right, 76% you said.
they are significantly less likely to have access to the key workplace benefits that could actually help them manage these competing demands. Only 44% of millennial sandwich caregivers report having flexible work hours. That's compared to higher rates for Gen X and Boomers.
Only 44%.
Even fewer, just 31% have access to paid sick leave. And a really low number, only 13%, have access to employee assistance programs or EAPs, which can offer counseling and resources.
That seems like a huge gap. The youngest generation facing this squeeze, maybe earning less to begin with, still building their careers, they have fewer safety nets at work than older caregivers.
It absolutely is a policy issue and a workplace culture issue. The expert commentary points out that millennial caregivers already spend a higher percentage of their income on caregiving costs than any other age group. So you layer that financial pressure with less access to supportive policies like paid leave or flex time. They're under immense pressure without the very tools that could help them stay employed and financially afloat.
One of the sources you mentioned included a personal story, someone named Alexis. It sounds like it really brings these statistics to life. Can you share a bit about that?
Yeah, the story of Alexis is, it's a powerful illustration of exactly what so many sandwich caregivers go through. Back in 2015, her mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Okay.
At that time, Alexis had 2 young kids herself, aged 3 and 11. Both she and her husband worked full-time. Her dad was elderly and just couldn't provide all the care her mom needed. So facing this crisis, Alexis and her husband made this incredibly tough decision to move their family in with her parents to help out.
Wow. Uprooting their own family, moving in. That's a massive disruption.
Huge. And it immediately created challenges they hadn't even anticipated, one of the biggest.
Yeah.
Suddenly facing additional childcare costs they hadn't budgeted for, maybe needing different hours or types of care because their home situation changed so drastically.
Oh,
And Alexa says something reflecting on that time that I think just perfectly captures the feeling for so many in this generation. She said, "We didn't have a plan. We're simply trying to make it all work."
Trying to make it all work. Yeah, that phrase,
Yeah.
it just sums up that constant, often reactive scramble, doesn't it?
It really does. And her story connects directly to a major barrier that the report identifies, the severe lack of affordable, high-quality childcare. For families like Alexis's, they might be looking at potential out-of-pocket costs for elder care, which the report says can average nearly $7,000 a year nationally.
Okay, $7,000 for elder care.
On top of the national average child care cost, which is almost $10,000 per year per child.
$10,000 a year for childcare. Per kid. For years on end. I mean, that's just a staggering financial load.
It is, and the source makes it really clear that for many, many families, that cost makes good childcare completely unaffordable or simply unavailable in their area. And reliable childcare is absolutely essential for parents, especially mothers, to stay in the paid workforce. So when families are forced into this impossible choice, pay crippling childcare costs, cover unexpected elder care expenses, or have someone leave their job to provide all the care unpaid, it just creates this terrible bind. It perpetuates financial strain and can really trap families in cycles of economic instability. Alexis's story is just that vivid human face on the unexpected reality and the crushing weight carried by those just trying to make it all work.
Okay, so faced with all this, the financial crunch, the emotional drain, the hit to work and health, what kind of guidance do the sources actually offer? How can people navigate this?
Well, they offer a pretty wide range of strategies and suggestions touching on, the financial side, the practical stuff, emotional well-being, and the legal aspects too. But if there's one core theme that runs through almost all the advice, particularly from the Treasury source we looked at, it's the absolute necessity of planning.
Planning. Okay, sounds crucial. But where do you even begin planning when you're already feeling overwhelmed?
Thorough financial planning is really presented as the cornerstone, and that starts with creating a really detailed, realistic monthly budget. And it has to account for everything.
Not just the usual household bills.
No. Not just your mortgage, utilities, food, and your own kids' costs. It also has to include any costs, direct or indirect, related to caring for your parents. That could be contributing to their rent, covering medical copays, gas for driving them places, buying supplies, maybe paying for a few hours of outside help. You have to see the whole picture.
Understanding exactly where all the money is going across both generations.
Exactly. That's the first step to seeing where the strain really lies and where you might possibly be able to make adjustments.
And building in some kind of buffer for surprises.
Absolutely vital. The sources really emphasize creating a solid emergency fund, ideally enough to cover 6 to 12 months of your essential expenses.
6 to 12 months. That's a lot.
It is, but it's crucial because caregiving situations are just inherently unpredictable. A sudden hospitalization, needing unexpected home modifications, needing to hire temporary help during a crisis, or even covering your own lost income if you suddenly have to take unpaid leave.
Right.
Without that emergency fund, one unexpected event can just completely derail your finances.
The Treasury source also mentioned investing. How does that fit in?
Yeah, it suggests looking at investing for the future. The idea being that investing helps protect the value of any assets you have over time and allows for potential growth, which is really critical when your budget is already stretched so thin.
Makes sense.
It specifically mentions considering gold as one investment option. It's presented in that source as something that could potentially offer stability and hold its value over the long term. Now, obviously, any investment advice from one source needs to be seen as just that one perspective. But it does highlight the need to think about long-term financial security, even while you're dealing with the immediate day-to-day pressures.
What about involving the rest of the family in this planning? How do you bring kids or parents into it?
The Treasury source really advocates for empowering other family members through education and, importantly, open dialogue. For your own kids, it suggests teaching them basic financial management skills early on.
Not to burden them, but to prepare them.
Exactly. It's about equipping them for their own future independence. Simple things, saving allowance, understanding budgeting, maybe even introducing basic concepts like how saving money in a bank earns interest, or how certain assets might hold value over time, like they mentioned digital gold as an example. The goal is to help your children develop strong financial literacy so they're better prepared themselves and maybe less likely to face this kind of intense sandwich squeeze without any preparation down the road.
So teaching your kids now might ease their burden later. Interesting. What about with your parents?
With parents, it's about fostering their independence as much as possible and, crucially, having those open conversations, talking about their retirement plans, what income sources they have, how their assets are managed, maybe helping them organize things, or ensuring their retirement funds are managed prudently again. The source mentions looking at options for stability and liquidity, like gold, if it fits their situation.
Okay.
And critically, it also means talking about their healthcare and encouraging good health routines. If parents can stay healthier longer through proactive care, it can potentially minimize future medical crises and those huge associated costs that cause so much financial and emotional strain.
These family conversations, though, especially about money, they can be incredibly awkward, even difficult.
Oh, absolutely. They can be really tough. But both the Treasury source and the Forbes article really stress that open, honest communication within the family about finances, about care needs, about who's doing what. It's just vital.
Why? What does it achieve?
Well, it helps reduce stress just by bringing things out into the open. It helps everyone involved, kids and parents, feel more valued and supported. And really importantly, it opens the door to distributing tasks and burdens more fairly. Maybe siblings who live further away can contribute financially or handle paperwork, even if they can't do the hands-on care.
Right. It takes courage, though.
It definitely requires vulnerability, but the sources suggest it's necessary to prevent burnout and resentment from building up.
Okay, beyond the practical and financial, we talked about that huge emotional and physical toll. What about self-care for the caregiver themselves?
This is presented not as a luxury, but as absolutely critical. It's essential for the caregiver's ability to actually sustain the role and avoid complete burnout. The Treasury source is straightforward. Get enough rest, get regular exercise, make time for hobbies, find ways to relax. You have to carve out moments for yourself somehow.
Even when it feels impossible.
Especially then. And the Forbes source echoes advice from the Surgeon General about setting healthy boundaries. That means learning to say no sometimes, or setting realistic limits on what you can actually do without collapsing. And practicing self-compassion, acknowledging that you're doing the best you can in a really hard situation.
Yeah, you really can't pour from an empty cup, can you?
Exactly. The message is crystal clear. If you let yourself get totally depleted physically and emotionally, you just can't effectively care for anyone else in the long run. Ignoring your own health just leads straight back to those stats we saw, caregiving making your own health worse.
This seems tightly linked to seeking and accepting help too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not trying to do it all alone.
It absolutely is. You don't have to be the superhero martyr. The sources strongly suggest actively seeking support, whether it's from siblings, friends, joining a caregiver support group, maybe even seeking professional counseling, just sharing the load, talking about the challenges, getting emotional backup. It's vital.
And then there's delegating tasks.
Yes, and that can be the really hard step for a lot of people.
Delegating sounds easy in theory, but yeah, letting go.
It's often very difficult. It means letting go of some control, trusting that others, whether it's your brother, a friend, or a paid professional, can handle things well enough. But delegating things like financial tasks, some household chores, grocery runs, or even using outside help like house cleaners, meal delivery, maybe an adult daycare program for your parent a couple of days a week, or hiring a professional caregiver for even just a few hours. It can make a huge difference.
Frees up your time and energy.
Exactly. The challenge, as one source points out, is often just overcoming that internal reluctance to let go and actually trust others to step in.
Legal planning was another big area the sources highlighted as essential. Why is that considered so critical?
The Texas Trust Law source lays it out very clearly. Legal planning is crucial for several key reasons. First, and maybe most importantly, it ensures your parents' wishes about their finances, their healthcare choices, their final arrangements. All of that is clearly documented and legally binding. It avoids guesswork later.
Okay. Prevents arguments.
Exactly. Second, having those legal documents in place helps prevent potentially really ugly family disputes or confusion among siblings about what mom or dad wanted or who should be making decisions if they can't. Third, it helps you avoid costly and incredibly stressful court battles, like having to go through guardianship proceedings, which are expensive, time-consuming, and just emotionally draining for everyone.
Right.
And finally, having things like powers of attorney set up before a crisis hits just makes everything smoother. It allows a designated person to step in and manage financial or medical affairs seamlessly if a parent suddenly becomes unable to handle things themselves.
What specific legal documents are we talking about here?
The key ones mentioned are powers of attorney. You typically need one for finances, allowing someone to manage bank accounts, pay bills, things like that, and a separate one for healthcare, allowing someone to make medical decisions if the parent can't communicate.
Okay, POA for finance, POA for health.
Right. Then healthcare directives, often called living wills. These outline a person's specific wishes for medical treatment, especially around end-of-life care. Depending on the circumstances, guardianship or conservatorship might become necessary, but really the goal of planning early is often to avoid needing those more restrictive court processes.
And the source really hammered home doing this planning early, right?
Yes, that is a critical takeaway. Waiting until there's already a health crisis or until cognitive decline has set in severely limits the options and just ramps up the stress for everybody involved. Planning early, ideally getting help from an elder law attorney who specializes in this stuff, allows for thoughtful decisions, ensures the documents are done correctly and are legally valid, and just gives everyone peace of mind knowing things are in place before an emergency forces rushed, difficult choices.
Are there other resources out there that sandwich caregivers can potentially tap into?
Yeah, the sources mention looking into community programs, government assistance options, various nonprofit organizations. These can sometimes offer help with things like elder care referrals, finding housing options, transportation services, or navigating medical benefits like Medicare or Medicaid.
But are these easy to find or access?
Well, that's the catch. The reports also highlight that sandwich caregivers often feel like they need more information and really struggle to access affordable help. A huge number, 85%, said they needed more information on at least one caregiving topic. The biggest needs were help managing their own stress, 44%, and advice on keeping their care recipients safe at home, 43%.
And affordability is a problem too.
Yes, finding affordable care services remains a major hurdle for a quarter, 25% of those actively looking for help. So the resources might exist on paper, but accessing them, affording them, that's another significant challenge.
What about bigger picture support? like from employers or through policy changes? Do the sources touch on that?
They do. They touch on these important systemic issues. From a workplace perspective, they suggest things like companies offering paid leave, parental, medical, sick leave that truly covers caregiving needs, offering genuinely flexible work hours, not just in name only, making sure employee assistance programs include specific resources for caregivers, and just fostering a more family-friendly culture overall, one that includes good mental health coverage.
And policy-wise.
From a broader policy standpoint, ideas mentioned in the sources include things like exploring paid care programs that might compensate family caregivers for some of their time, looking at income tax credits for caregiving expenses, considering Social Security credits for time spent out of the workforce providing care, big pushes for improving access to affordable, high-quality childcare, expanding existing laws like the CARE Act, which helps hospitals better involve family caregivers in discharge planning, and just generally addressing the significant gaps in our long-term care system.
So lots of ideas floating around.
Yeah, these are presented neutrally in the sources, just as discussions and suggestions that come out of the research, pointing towards how society might better support this huge and growing group of caregivers.
Finally, that Treasury source also mentioned planning your own legacy. Seems like one more thing to worry about.
Yeah, it does sound like adding to the list. But the point is, while you're so focused on caring for parents and kids, it's important not to completely neglect planning for your own future and for your own heirs. Creating a clear estate plan for yourself, having a will, deciding how your assets get distributed is also crucial.
Why? To avoid problems later.
Exactly. The goal is to try and prevent potential conflicts or disputes among your children down the line, which would just add another layer of stress and complexity onto the next generation. It's really about providing clarity and promoting fairness for the future you eventually leave behind.
Okay, so stepping back now and looking at everything we've covered, the sheer demands, the constant strain, the impact on work, on finances, on health. It really is this interconnected web of challenges, isn't it?
It truly is. You see how the financial pressures directly fuel the emotional and physical strain? That strain then impacts your ability to work effectively, maybe even impacts your own health, which in turn makes it even harder to provide the care needed. It can become a real negative feedback loop.
Yeah.
And that's why all these strategies we talked about, the comprehensive planning, tapping into resources, asking for and accepting support, and maybe most importantly, prioritizing your own well-being. They aren't just nice-to-haves. They're presented as absolutely vital for just managing the immense demands of caring for multiple generations at the same time.
This deep dive has definitely shed a lot of light on the complex reality of the sandwich generation. We've seen the sheer scale millions grappling with these huge responsibilities. We've explored that intense financial and emotional squeeze, the very real hit to careers and health. It's so clear from the data, this is a widespread, significant challenge.
And hopefully the sources offer some essential lessons, some takeaways for anyone who finds themselves in this situation, or even just trying to understand it better.
What would you say are the absolute key takeaways?
Well, first, planning financial, legal, thinking ahead about care, it's not optional. It's presented as absolutely essential. And starting that planning early, before a crisis hits, makes a world of difference. Gives you more options, less stress.
Okay. Planning is number one. What else?
Second, communication within the family is just non-negotiable. Having those open, sometimes difficult but honest conversations about needs, about money, about who does what, it's crucial for sharing the burden fairly and making sure everyone feels heard.
Makes sense. Third,
seeking and accepting help isn't weakness. It's actually a sign of strength and realism. Leaning on family, friends, support groups, professionals like financial advisors or elder law attorneys, counselors, using those resources is vital. You can't do it all alone.
Right. And the fourth key takeaway.
Fourth, and maybe the most fundamental piece, you absolutely have to prioritize your own physical and mental health. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's the foundation that allows you to sustainably care for others over the long haul. You have to put your own oxygen mask on first, right?
Absolutely. It's clearly an immense responsibility, and one that seems to only be getting more common as people live longer and economic pressures mount. So, considering everything we've discussed, the rising costs, the longer lifespans mentioned in these sources, here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to take away and chew on. Given that this kind of multi-generational caregiving challenge isn't likely going away anytime soon, how can families proactively start having these conversations and doing this planning now? Not just dealing with the immediate crisis, but thinking decades ahead. How can we lessen the future burden, not just for today's sandwich generation, but maybe for the generations that follow?